welcome to a video. My name's Alex, or Poetaster on the internet, since my name's super normal and really difficult to search for. And this is my beautiful son, Amiglio, in the background here. So I'm probably not going to do one of these scripted talking head intros. Usually, you have to do my hair and take a shower. It's like a whole ordeal. But I wanted to do one today because this is the first video in a new series called Making It Work. And basically this series is going to be about taking broken things that I get for, cheap or free and, making them work. And I think that's super important from a circuit bending perspective because A, you never want to circuit bend something that's really expensive, and B, the idea of recycling broken or heavily used things, I think better fits the ethos of the kind of person who gets into circuit bending. So the working title for the segment was Can I Fix It? And so if in any older footage I used that term, this is the segment I was referring to. Ultimately, I did move away from that name because I just kind of felt super clickbaity to call it Can I Fix It? When, if I'm uploading video, odds are yes I can fix it, because why else would I put a video out there? So Making It Work just seemed a little bit more appropriate. That said, if I ever do come across something where I can't actually fix it, but I think that something in the troubleshooting process or what have you is useful for other people and I want to show it off, I may put that out there. But if that ever happens, I'll be super upfront about the fact that I'm not actually able to fix it, so that if someone's out there looking for help on how to repair a similar thing, they don't, get tricked into watching a video that's not going to help them. That's certainly not my goal at all. And the other reason I call it Making It Work rather than Can I Fix It is I think it better highlights the fact that, I'm not trying to necessarily repair these things to how they were off the shelf or restore them in any kind of way. Really the main goal is just getting it to work well enough that we can circuit bend it or use it in a, either as it was intended or in a different way as part of an art installation, something like that. So we may not necessarily restore it to, exactly how it was when it rolled off the factory floor. We may not restore all functions of a device, but, we're gonna make it work for whatever our intended purpose is. So the approach for these videos is going to be super similar to the Super Circuit Bending Super Show. It's mostly just going to be simple top-down desk shots with some pretty minimal editing. The one caveat I would say is that I intend for these videos to be much shorter, since I'm not going through the full process and showing every step like I want to do in the Circuit Bending Super Show. Here I'll be able to cut a lot more of the tedium and keep things a little bit shorter. And that way the focus is going to be on what is the troubleshooting process, what ultimately do I do to kind of fix things and get them working again. And the focus will be there rather than on showing the full process. So even though it'll still be that minimal editing style, I intend for there to be, I guess, a lot more edits. Still done pretty simply, but that will help keep things more focused and keep the videos shorter for this series. One thing I just want to mention up front, in this video you are going to see my goofy glove and my hand shaking around everywhere. So that's the result of a stroke I had last year. My left side doesn't quite work the way it should, and so that's what's up with that. I also mention it because the way I solder is wrong. So if you're new to this sort of thing and you see how I solder, don't copy me or don't think oh, I've been doing it wrong because this guy's doing it differently. The way that I solder is basically a way to do things one-handed. I mean, if you also only have one hand that you can work with, then by all means go ahead and copy me, but just know it's not really the right way to do things. So I just want to be super upfront about that's what's going on there. And also, because it's a brain damage thing, it is illegal to make fun of me. So I'd hate for anyone to go to jail because they didn't know that was the case. So with all that said, let's go ahead and try to fix this video mixer. I will apologize in advance. This video is probably going to be a lot more disjointed than most of them will be, just because I was figuring it out as I went along, and this was filmed over quite a few months, so it might be a little all over the place, but that it should get tightened up in future episodes. Okay, let's move over to the bench and get to work. This is a little video/audio mixer I picked up for parts on the cheap, and long story short, it does not power on. And let's see if I can make it power on. So, just to kind of talk you through what I did off camera when I first got it. Let's check it out. First thing that's always good to do, and can save you a lot of money, because a lot of times people don't know how to do this or they get it wrong. But turn this so it's actually the right way out. Cinematography. But over your AC adapter, you will have a symbol like this. And it'll tell you 12 volts, 1 amp. So that means you need a 12 volt power supply that goes at least 1 amp. If you had like a 12 volt 3 amp, that would be fine. Right? It's only it's gonna try to pull up to 1 amp, and the power supply needs to do it. So really, the amperage just means if you have a little, like 500 milliamp power supply, it may not power this thing up. They usually leave some wiggle room, so it still might work, but the really important thing is this symbol here, and that's the polarity indicator. So how this little symbol works is this little C, I remember it as the C for center, is open towards whichever polarity this center pin, this middle pin is. So this is center positive, meaning this pin is going to be positive and the sleeve around it is going to be negative. I think how it actually works is it's supposed to be a picture, right? This dot is the pin, the dot is positive, and the sleeve outside the dot is negative. The C, that's just how I remember it. But yeah, so having the correct polarity is super important. A lot of times if you buy stuff that says it doesn't power on, you just make sure you actually use the correct power supply. I feel like 9 times out of 10, I've gotten a lot of, especially SK1s, that way. That people say, oh, it doesn't work, it doesn't power on. But if you set up your power supply correctly, it totally does. So this is my universal supply for testing. I've got it set to 12 volts. I had to jerry-rig my own polarity switch because this one didn't have one. I've got it set to center positive. And show y'all. Plug it in, and yeah, nothing. One thing I am going to check is make sure I have the right barrel on there. There's a few different sizes of barrel plug that'll come on these multi-adapters, and I'm sure there's a scientific, smart way to know which one works. But I kind of just see which ones fit, and then of the ones that fit, do any of them work? For instance, this one with the little black band on the tip does not fit. But this one with the white tip does. So this blue one seems to be the most common. I think it's the
2.1 by 5 millimeter, whatever standard barrel plug is. Okay. There's still nothing even with the other barrel on. And I'm going back to the blue one because I think that is the right size. It just feels like a better fit. So now that we've kind of double checked it, and we know it really isn't powering on, let's open it up and see what's going on inside. But while I'm doing that, my main interest in this piece was, it looks like it has some sort of keying function. So what you may commonly hear referred to as green screen, that's color keying. So there's color keying, and then there's all the different types of keying, but there's one that's basically brightness and one that's based on color. And just based on what I can see on the cover of this thing, oh yeah, you can do either a Luma key or a blue key. Alright, next, pull these off. Another thing I'm keeping an eye on, this button here is really messed up. This stick, I don't know if it's just because it's cheap, but it feels awful. It's like super crinkly and let's see. Better view. We have this light. I'm sorry, this button is really bad, and I don't know if the audio's coming through on there, but it's just like scraping paper when you use the joystick. The first thing I noticed when I popped this open is all this brown stuff on the top, and at first I thought that might be rust, but I think it's actually a bit more exciting than that. So if you look down here, there we go. Well, more zoomed out, but at least it's in focus. You can see the tops of these electrolytic capacitors have completely split open, and the real name for it, the capacitive goo, has come out, and I'm trying to tilt this so y'all can see on this one on the right. Actually, on both of them, it looks like it came out with enough force that it stained the walls of the chassis here. So I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that that's probably why we're not getting power, because these are the main power filtering capacitors. So those being gone, would probably do the trick. So basically, next step is going to be to pull this board out. Just checking back to see. Looks like we do have a few screws on the back of the chassis. And then we'll pull the screws on the board itself and get that taken out. This isn't terribly exciting, so I'll probably fast forward through this part. Catching things with the screwdriver is probably not super smart, but this thing's pretty banged up anyway. I'm not worried about giving it a few new scratches. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's a huge number of screws on this board. Sometimes they go really ham, and that's a little bit annoying. Tweezers are your best friend when doing stuff like this. If you get into weird spots, see a bunch of these. So now that I've got the board out, the next thing I'm going to do is just give it a good once over. Obviously, these capacitors are a problem. I'm fairly confident that they may be our only problem, since our issue is just we're not getting power. You can see our power would come in here. These would be our main filtering capacitors. And based on this great big heat sink, that should be a voltage regulator right here. Yeah, so when you see a big heat sink like this in one of these little 3-pin ICs, a lot of times that's going to be your voltage regulator. You can see these are pretty directly tied to our main voltage supply. Looks like there is a spot here, an unused spot, for another capacitor. But since they didn't use it, we won't worry about it. So what I'm looking for is just to check and see, does it look like anything else went wrong here? You can see on that IC, on that voltage regulator IC, there's a bit of a mark. I'm trying to tell if that's just the indentation mark to show you which way to put it in, or if that might be something where it's, let its magic smoke out. And if we take a look right here, you can see that mark I'm talking about. It looks like that IC has blown and probably took those capacitors with it. I wonder if maybe somebody plugged in something with the wrong polarity and kind of blew it up, since it looks like, I was kind of surprised to see there aren't really any like diodes or anything that would protect it from something like that. Yeah, I'm going to try to see if I can tell what the marking on that IC is. Try to find something to prop this board up on. Just so you all don't have to see my shaky hand going the whole time. Reading stuff like this, my eyes are shot, so trick I'll use just to use my phone and just use the zoom on the camera to read little part numbers and stuff. Move this out. See what I am looking at. What I can see on there, it's a something 050S. And you can get a much better look at that kind of damage I was talking about. After doing some homework, which translates to basically just going on the Ask Electronics subreddit and trying those pictures I took, asking for some help. I think I have found what that IC is. The logo I didn't recognize. It's from a company called Sanken, S-A-N-K-E-N, Sanken. So he hooked me up with the data sheet. It's an 805 OS, or 8050S. So with that 8 being blown off, it was pretty hard to read and find. So I hunted down a couple of those on eBay, just to get 2 of these, just in case I blow up one of them. From the US, it's like $10. Probably get them cheaper from China, but I'm really impatient, so I should be able to replace this in these capacitors. But yeah, just real quickly, we're going to see what else we can see on this board, and just make sure. I'm fairly certain there's like nothing else really going on here. Just from looking at it visually, and basically you can see the power comes in, goes straight to the power switch, which is what is connected to this terminal. We've got filtering capacitors that feed into our voltage regulator. That's the main voltage supply for the rest of the unit. And you can see this diode here. This is, from what I can tell, the polarity protection. What keeps it so that if you, like I was showing earlier, that symbol where it's center positive, center negative, if you plug in something that's the wrong way, this diode is what basically protects you from blowing up the whole thing, right? From hooking it up backwards. And notably, everything on this side of the diode is blown up, and everything after this diode, just visually at least, looks completely fine. So last thing I'm going to do for now, while we are waiting on parts, is to swap over to the top board. And we're just going to give this a once over. Hopefully all we need to do is pop those buttons we noted at the beginning into place. And that'll be that. Yeah, here you can also tell when those capacitors blue, they went really, really hard. This is all the filler blasted up on the top there. It's pretty impressive. I don't think I've ever seen a capacitor blow out that bad before. So first thing is, these faders have a lot of junk built up on them. We'll give those all a good clean. For now, I'm just grabbing what I can with tweezers. Reason for that being, before you get out the contact cleaner and just turn that basically in the mud and push it down in there. Just grab any of these big chunks that are sitting there. And I don't intend to use this for audio, so if any of the audio faders are really noisy, I probably won't ever know, but just, for the sake of good practice while I'm in here, I may as well clean everything up. It looks, obviously dirty. And this is the main joystick that looked really awful when I was checking it out on the front panel. So I'll make sure to give this guy a good clean as well. This is what that front panel looks like from the back. Looks like these buttons are actually separately welded in place. There's like a peg that was sitting through and they melted it down, so fortunately I won't be able to take the individual button that's wonky off. Let's see if I can get a good shot of that. You can see this button here. It's kind of wonky and lifted off to the side. Thought it may have been stuck under the panel. I'm guessing at some point it was, but Actually, this plastic is just lifted here and gotten a little bit twisted over time. So I may just try to hit that with a little bit of super glue, see if that helps at all. But more importantly, just going to give that plastic thing a really good cleaning. I think that is where I'm going to leave this one for now. Once the other parts come in, I'll kind of continue cleaning this up. I'll wash these big plastic parts off camera and just do that like in the kitchen sink with some soap and water. And come back to this board with some contact cleaner. Just kind of spray out all these faders and potentiometers before I put it back on. But honestly, kind of as expected, in keeping with, the other board, everything here looks fine. All these capacitors look good. Yeah, we'll get all that cleaned up, get those parts replaced, and see if that does get it back up and running. So just to recap real quickly, so these capacitors here on our little Numark Video Mixer are completely blown, like just completely destroyed. And when we looked at it, this little voltage regulator was too. So I've gotten a new voltage regulator, 2 of them actually, and we're going to desolder these 3 components, replace them, and then see if this thing works. Alright, so I'm going to fire up the desoldering gun. While that is heating up, I'm just going to put a little bit of flux. All these points. While that's heating up, so these are the 2 capacitors. I'm going to be desoldering these, and up here is the voltage regulator. I'll be desoldering as well. I don't know if you can see here, but basically the trick with these is to really heat up the solder before you start the suction. And of course, you don't actually need a desoldering gun. The little pop tube things that let you just slurp off a bit of solder. Those work perfectly fine. The gun is handy for with my goofy left hand. Makes it much easier. But definitely don't think you need one of those in order to do this kind of work. You really don't. I think these capacitors are just being held in by the bent leads, so I'm just trying to bend those straight. So that's what I'm doing with the pliers. I'm not really wrenching on anything, just trying to tease these straight. Just gonna see. Alright, so that one came out just fine. Let's do this guy. There's another look at these completely blown up caps. And next, I'm taking the little screw off from here. That was really probably melted in there a little bit. I'm just trying to get that lined up properly. And so get that screwed back onto the heatsink. So I've got my replacement capacitors here. And now I'm just getting these guys inserted. This is the first one. Second. And I'm just kind of lifting up and bending the leads underneath. So when I turn it over, they'll stay where I put them. So next thing we're going to do is just solder all of these points in place. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and reflow the main power connector. I don't see anything terribly wrong there, but it's right here, so we may as well do that. That's a common break point. These solder points get a little loose and start rocking around, and then the power doesn't work properly. So now we can see we've got our nice new components installed. So next up, we just need to put it back together and see if it fires up. And what happens now is when I plug it in and turn it on, we get kind of like a flash occasionally, and if I manipulate the power plug, I can kind of sometimes find a sweet spot where the LEDs flash for a second. So that leads me to believe that we've potentially also got an issue here of the actual power socket itself being being bad. So I've tried cleaning it. I've tried, really getting in there and scraping it out, but it still kind of fits loose. Pull this out and see if you can see. Yeah, you can see it. It's really loose in there. And this is after having the solder reflowed, so it's not shaking around on the board. The barrel jack is just jiggling around in there, so I think it is the jack itself that's potentially worn out. So the next thing we're going to try is just to see if we directly connect in some power, if it works. And if that does the trick, I'll just pop in a new power jack, and this guy will be fixed. And next up, I'm just going to tin this wire up, bring it down, and attach it to the rear contact point, since this is a center positive connection. Here comes the fan. Alright, so that is the red wire in. Tip it up. It's not the prettiest solder joint. I was actually thought I may have messed up and not gotten a good joint at all, but it does actually seem mechanically stronger than it looks, so I think it is pretty good in there. Now we're just going to rinse and repeat with our black wire. And that is going to be for the sleeve connection, since, again, this is center positive, so the sleeve will be negative. And, yeah, unfortunately, because of this lip, y'all can't see the connector I'm going for, but it'll be right on the side over here. Okay, so where I'm hooking it up. Alright, here comes the fan.
is also not pretty, but appears to be on there. That is fine. Some test leads here. I'm just making sure these test leads go off onto the silicon mat. Not as big a deal with the ground wire, obviously, but, you know, the main point of me moving them like that is to make sure I don't accidentally ground the hot wire to the chassis. That would not be good. Okay, so I've got the test leads hooked up. Get my power supply here. Okay. So that is looking positive. So now we're getting lights coming on and staying on. So we can press a couple of the buttons here. And it looks like it was doing what it should do. So that seems really promising. Promising enough at the very least that I'm willing to drill a hole in this to mount up a new power jack. So get situated here, and then we'll get that going. So after some ado, I'm back to this one. Let me recap what went on off camera here. Basically, after we soldered up our new connector, I did a power on test. It worked correctly. That was great. So once I got it soldered up and in place and kind of started putting things back together, I did another power up test, and it was back to just kind of flickering occasionally, just like it was when we started. So after rechecking and rechecking and rechecking, I redid the solders because I thought maybe I just screwed something up there, because, you know, it worked pretty well when we clipped things in. And long story short, even though I've tested the switch with continuity many times, I had to go through with a voltage probe, checking the voltage to see where things were getting lost. Because when I checked at the diode for our power supply, I would expect to get, you know, the 5 volts coming out, but I was getting nothing on either side of the diode. So I knew I wasn't getting power still, even with the new power jack. So I just traced the power signal backwards, and lo and behold, we were only getting about 2 volts through the switch. So I'd never seen that before. Basically, there was a problem with the switch, but it was still reading continuity and making a connection, just a really crap one, I guess, with a lot of resistance. Not enough resistance to throw. I don't know what's up with the switch. If this is something you've run into before, I would love some insight, so please drop a comment if you know what's up with that. But basically, only 2 volts was getting through the switch, which is not nearly enough to power up our 12-volt converter as expected. So the flickering was the thing basically trying to boot up on no voltage at all. And how I know that is now I have installed just a jumper wire in here where the switch contacts would normally be. And lo and behold, now when I hook up power, as you can see, the whole board actually powers up and stays on. So I've got video selectors and all that good stuff. So before I drill another big hole in here for another switch, I'm just going to test this out a little more thoroughly, make sure I'm satisfied that it is really and truly fixed before we wrap up this repair. There we go. And I've got a little like pseudo Game Boy thing here that has an AV output, and it's super handy for testing stuff like this out. Excuse the incredibly messy desk. No excuses, I'm just very messy. But anyhow, so this is our big video signal, and let's see. So I've got bus A set to video 1, and bus B I'm going to set to a background. There we go. So now I've got a oh, gotcha. Okay, so this is my white controller. And I should, as you can't see my hand, but I thought it was this center bar was just a speed control, but it is actually a manual fade. Now I can turn on effects, I can invert the video signal, I can do a still. So now, even though, you know, I hit start a bunch of times to get to this other screen, so that's pretty handy that you can freeze it in one place. So that is a mosaic. So basically a pixelate effect. The picture-in-picture works. I can move this thing around. Okay, so what I've done here, I only have one little video input signal, so I was trying to figure out how to test keying. Basically, I've got bus A is the video signal, bus B is the same video signal but inverted, and so you can see as I start to chroma key, it starts to fade into the invert. And you can tell by how it kind of snaps and goes with each color type that it's keying over rather than just doing a wipe or something. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is repaired enough for us to go ahead and finish up. And I don't know if you heard that, but I instinctively just flipped the power switch, which is disconnected and didn't do anything. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drill another hole in this for a power switch, and then I'll cut on the camera to kind of show when that's done, and do a little wrap up and just kind of verify everything still works and I don't break it again. So to wrap up on the Numark Video Mixer here, just wanted to show the new switch I installed. It's a great big toggle switch, which I'm always a fan of, and basically I just use that because it let me use the hole that was kind of already there from the old switch. I didn't get any footage of this, but just to recap it, because I thought it was kind of interesting. At first I thought I was going to be clever and reuse the original connector to hook the new switch to the board. But when I wired that up, I was actually getting the same results I got off the old switch, so I think whatever cooked, most of the power supply components here somehow managed to damage the connector. It may not have damaged the switch, or it may have. There's a lot of burn marks on it, like we previously saw. But basically replace those with just fresh wire. And now everything seems to work consistently. So now I'm gonna flip my big toggle switch there. We actually get lights, and lights stay on. And so we're getting much more consistent power now that we've replaced all those blown components, and then also the power jack and switch getting a much better connection. So the last thing I'm going to do before I wrap this guy up is just bring out the test monitor. So here, because I've only got one audio signal, or I'm sorry, one video signal, what I've got it doing, I've got it set up so that bus A has the normal input off my dinky little kind of game thing here, and then the signal B is actually basically a feedback loop. So I'm taking the second output and just routing it back into bus B. Now you can get some really, really wild kind of feedback stuff going on here. And the further I push it, the more it kind of distorts down into those color waves. So yeah, as you can see, this thing is going to be pretty cool for making some different glitch effects. And this is without even any circuit bending, just kind of using feedback loops with it. So I am very well pleased with how this turned out. Yeah, as you can see, all sorts of fun stuff here. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video here and call this fixed. Off camera, I'm gonna, put the screws back in and get it put away. We may see this guy come back on a super circuit bending super show episode. But for now, I think I'm just gonna leave it stock and kind of put it in my video art tower, so that now I'll have a keyer that I can play with. But yeah, I may come back down the road and decide that having some circuit bend glitches in here would be cool too. It definitely seems like a good candidate for circuit bending. No plans to just yet, but maybe down the road I'll get that one taken. Get this one in the rotation. So with that said, I think I'm going to wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you stuck through the whole thing. It always feels weird to say, but it definitely goes a long way if folks like and subscribe to videos, especially as a teeny tiny channel. That kind of shows YouTube that I'm, a person to pay attention to, and kind of shows my videos to people when they're looking for projects. And it's also just a big motivator to see, comments and numbers coming in like that, because I'm a small enough channel. I do see all that, and it's super encouraging to see on the last couple videos. So really appreciate everyone who has already done that, and definitely appreciate anyone who does with this video as well. But with that said, I'm going to put this one away, and I'll see y'all in the next one.